When I think of the Wii, two things typically come to mind. Crappy shovelware titles, and morbidly obese people trying to get super thin by doing absolutely nothing. I don't typically think of kick-ass RPGs, and I guess that's why a game like Opoona really surprised me. Opoona stars, well, Opoona. He and his family are off on a family vacation to Landroll, a planet that is split in half by dark energy. Half of it is covered in pure dark crystal and monsters. The other half is inhabited by people trying to survive in different domes. On their way to this planet, their spaceship gets shot down, and Opoona's family ends up getting completely dispersed along the planet. Opoona's parents end up in serious critical condition and are taken to Sanctuary, a special sort of medical center that's where the overseers of the planet live and are being treated there. Opoona's sister, Polina, is completely missing, and Opoona's little brother, Opoona, was found with him and taken to the Tokyo Dome, a sort of school. In order to get to Sanctuary, Opoona has to try and become a greater citizen, as Landroll is very much a class-based society. So in order to get to Sanctuary, Opoona and his brother must take on various jobs. No, not those kind of jobs. I mean stuff like becoming a fisherman, or a dancer, or becoming a miner using a hoverboard drill thing because space. Definitely one of the most unique things about Opoona is it's very much about doing various jobs and exploration. It's very much not a combat-focused game. Combat takes maybe 10% of the overall experience, but the rest of the time you're exploring these different domes, looking for various jobs to do. But I'll expand on that in a bit. Presentation is really gorgeous. Of note, there is one problem, and that is the edges on the characters, especially Opoona. They're a little rough and pixelated. Now, after about 5-10 minutes, you'll get used to it, so it's not that big a deal. Now, that said, Opoona's aesthetic is really neat. It combines both a sort of technological feel with all the structures, but it also mixes that with a natural feel with the outsides of the domes. One of the most impressive things about Opoona is its integration of art. Art is definitely a major component in Opoona, and it actually ties in heavily with the mechanics of the game, because Opoona's ability to discern art actually affects his overall stats, what jobs he can do, what people will respond to him. It's definitely a really cool thing to do. It allows you to explore this sort of world where you see all sorts of just weird sort of kinetic art and sculptures, and it definitely gives the landscape a greater sort of alien feel. Also, this lady. Just this lady. The animation is gorgeous and quite surprising. I mean, just look at this guy. Look at this guy. I mean, you see this? This is awesome. Or how about these guys? It is just... there is no reason to have this on just random NPCs, but the fact that it's there is just mind-blowing. The sound design of this game is really good. Inside you get this sort of synth techno sort of thing, and while it's not really my cup of tea, it's very good for what it's trying to do. It's very upbeat, and it fits the techno style of the game. Once you hit combat, it sort of turns into this sort of comical song that reflects the high energy of the combat, but all while keeping a sort of cheery atmosphere. The controls are impressive. It controls with a basic Wii Remote nunchuck combination, but you can play this game with one hand. Let me explain. Opoona controls with the control stick, right? Well, you can talk to people, access your menus, and even modify your camera with the control stick and C button. The only other time I've seen a one-handed control scheme was with Earthbound, and that was pretty cool there too. It works here, but it's got some problems. One of the three biggest flaws I found with this game came with the controls, namely the camera. Outside of battle, the camera is way too zoomed in on Opoona. This is a serious flaw because if it was zoomed out a little more, you could see a lot more of the environment. And I would be really interested in seeing more of this environment because honestly, it's gorgeous, especially with all the art and stuff. You can modify your camera angle with the use of either the Wii Remote directional buttons, which will rotate the camera arbitrary angles around Opoona, or a more active control over the camera. Now, the problem with this is that it works using the C button as well as manually using the stick on the nunchuck. The problem is as soon as you find the sort of camera angle you want, as soon as you take your finger off the C button or off the stick, it will reset. So it requires constant manual control, which means you won't be moving your character around at the same time, and it just lacks precision and is kind of a big oversight. Given how cool this environment is, it seems like a serious flaw. That's just kind of sad because all this art is in here. It really should be watched, especially seeing as it's incorporated into nature sometimes, or the architecture of the world. The basic mechanics of this game are that your character gets dropped into this area, and what you have to do is try and find your way from the various domes to eventually get to Sanctuary. Now, as I said, this is a class-based society, and the only way to raise your class is by doing various jobs, getting different licenses, and finding your way through the ranks of the world. It's very much a really good allegory for the business world, as you take your basic natural talents, such as your ability to fight, which gets really underutilized, or your ability to see art, and you build relationships with people also based on the most basic jobs, which in turn expands your network of friends and different jobs you can go to. So it's actually kind of a neat way to teach kids, or anyone really, the business world. Although I wish the business world was half as much fun as this game. That said, this game is heavily based on exploration, not combat. Once Opoona gets dropped into these domes, 90% of the doors are locked. And this is true after you more or less clear one dome and move on to the next. You have to start out by taking the most basic jobs. In one of them it might be like fishing or being a waiter or something. And once you slowly build your rank in that one class, you'll eventually go up in rank in society. Once you move up in rank, more doors will be unlocked and you'll be able to unlock new jobs and new areas to attend, meet new people, etc. On top of all of that, every time you enter a new area, you're going to want to explore pretty much every wall, as you'll see these little sticky notes with question marks on them. These are secret codes. You collect enough of each secret code, you can turn them in for upgrades to your character or just random items. Combat runs with the very simplistic control scheme of just using the nunchuck. This is actually kind of neat because all of your attacks are done in active time. Opoona is a Tysian. That means he doesn't use weapons, but rather he uses a sphere of energy that's connected to his body called a bonbon. You can see it floating above his head. How this works is by using the control stick, you tell Opoona how much of an energy and spin you want every time you throw your bonbon. What's cool about this is how much energy you put into your bonbon says how fast it'll move, how much damage it'll do, how harsh of a curve your throw will have. Now this is important because having a harsher throw means you can avoid certain targets, and sometimes there will be stuff like bombs or other hazards on the battlefield you don't want to hit. As well as some enemies will have weaknesses to certain throws, and if you hit them in such a way with certain throws, you can actually end up bending and crippling their body, thus causing them to take more damage. It's quite a cool system. On top of all of that, the more energy you put into your bonbon's throw will actually end up taking longer to recharge for the next throw. So if you're fighting a lot of enemies, you kind of have to juggle whether or not you want to throw more or you want to hit harder. All your damage and hit and miss ratios aren't based on numbers, but rather on the physical location of your bonbon. So certain enemies might approach you from a certain way. If you throw your bonbon in a specific way, you might miss it just because you don't know their approach or because your curve was off. But because of this, this also means you can't arbitrarily miss just because the game says you did. If you know how to hit your enemy, you can hit them. That means using special curves to avoid obstacles or using your bonbon as a shield last minute. It creates a cool dynamic in that you have to try and conserve your energy to maximize the number of throws you have, all while trying to do as much damage as possible. So you really have to understand how the controls work and how combat works. Now that said, with the basic control scheme, it's not entirely perfect, especially not combat, because your character does have special abilities they'll learn through leveling up. However, you have to access them through a menu, which works with the C button. While that's happening, you're getting attacked, so it's not the most precise menu navigation. That said, unless you need to heal, you really don't need to use it all that much, which is cool. Something worth noting is items in battle don't always work. And what I mean by that is items sort of come in two flavors, at least the consumables do. You get quick use items, which can be thrown into your battle backpack, and you've got other items which can't. Think of it along the lines as one being an active battle potion and the other being one to use outside of battle. Now the ones to use outside of battle will generally have a greater effect on your character, but the ones used inside of battle, they can get you out of a tight spot, so it's kind of important to manage that. The only other flaw I can see in this game isn't even a major one, is that it has a slightly dodgy translation. Every now and then you'll find grammatical errors, or you might be told to go somewhere that doesn't entirely make sense. That said, it's still a lot of fun for what it is. The replayability is mostly found just from wanting to re-experience this really cool environment that this world sets up. If you're a completionist, you might enjoy coming back to this because there are a lot of collectibles, especially if you take into account the secret codes as well as all the various jobs. This game is certainly a VOD game. That said, it's very much unique. It's doing its own thing, and in that regard it succeeds, because I can honestly say I have never played a game quite like Opoona. If you like RPGs, or anything that's a little offbeat, Opoona might be worth looking up. It's not terribly expensive, it's not a high demand, high print game, but I found my copy in brand new, factory sealed for $2. It was well worth that money. And honestly, if you want to teach your kid about how business works, this is actually a cool tutor. But that's Opoona. It's definitely a very unique title, if nothing else. It's very special, and I can say with full confidence, it's one of my favorite Wii titles. Although, to be fair, I can count the number of Wii titles on one hand that really stood out to me. Also, if someone tells you to not harass the bees, don't harass the bees.